it's simple, but it takes a lot of time. A large part of my job is to stay very well informed with space news. I want to tell you how I do it so that you can do it too. Hi, my name is Laura Forsick. I'm the executive director of space consulting firm Astrolytical. And a lot of people come to me for information about the space industry, about space happenings, about analysis in the space sector. And the only way I can do my job properly is by being very well informed on space news. You can refer back to my previous video on how I became an expert space news source. And I'm only able to do that by staying very well informed. So here's what I do, and there's nothing stopping you from doing this as well. I will warn you, this takes a lot of time. So first off, the most obvious is I read articles. I read space news articles or articles written by space beat reporters. And I really focus on the journalists who are experts in the space field. I don't typically read articles outside of space publications unless they are published by regular space beat journalists or by related industries, say aviation or cybersecurity. Those types of journalists might have a different take on the space sector. But in general, I stick with space beat journalists who really know what they're talking about, who have been following the industry for a long time. And that is what I do day in and day out. Every day I am reading anywhere from 20 minutes if it's a really busy day to an hour and a half worth of articles. I'll probably do a small list down in the description if you're curious about what publications I tend to follow the most when it comes to space news. Now, a note about opinion pieces, which you will see sometimes labeled pretty well as opinion pieces, but sometimes not so much. Maybe they're just guest writers. They are not the best resources for accurate news, but they are really good for pointing out biases and agendas. So I read them simply to keep up with, ooh, what is this company or what is this organization pushing? and that actually can be really super valuable in staying informed as well. Similar to that, I read a lot of space newsletters. Now, there has been a proliferation of newsletters lately. It just seems to be a very trendy thing to do right now is to start your own newsletter. You do not have to subscribe and read every single newsletter out there. Find your favorites, pick your favorites, read your favorites. If it's not a favorite anymore, go ahead and unsubscribe. But I read probably, I think it's like 3 daily newsletters, and I couldn't even tell you how many weekly newsletters dedicated to space. Dozens. And most of them are news aggregate or news analysis newsletters, and very few of them are company newsletters. Almost every company has their own newsletter, and I don't subscribe to many of those at all. So I really stick to the ones that are mainly about space and news. I'm a big podcast junkie. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I'm subscribed to close to 100 podcasts. Not all of them are space related, but most of them are. On any given day, I'm listening to, let's say 2 to 10 episodes of various podcasts and in varying lengths. You know, some of them are more like 20 minutes, some of them are an hour or longer. And for me, as a mom, I am constantly doing things with my hands around the house, tidying up, doing dishes, doing laundry. Even in the car, if I don't want to listen to music, I will listen to a podcast. Not everyone can operate this way, but I find that when my hands are preoccupied and my mind is wandering is the best time for me to listen to a podcast. And I really like the interviews that a lot of these podcasts put out, the unique takes from a guest speaker. But I also like sometimes that the podcast hosts pick out details of space news that I wasn't aware of or had previously missed. Sometimes they just have a different perspective or they notice things that I hadn't previously noticed, and that helps me to stay informed as well. Along with podcasts, we have conference talks, webinars, even congressional hearings. And I'm enough of a space policy junkie that I do watch congressional hearings when they're available. What these are for me are another means of a podcast. I rarely actually look and watch one of these conference recordings or other webinars. I listen to them. And for podcasts and webinars both, I listen between 1.5 to 2 times speed. That's just how I process. It helps me to get out some of the filler and really process the true information. Plus, helps save time so I can process more conferences, podcast episodes, talks more quickly. If you cannot attend a conference in person, then listening to the recordings, especially if you can skip past a lot of the, the filler, the logistics, the getting up from the podium and down from the podium, like it really does help you to get to the true core of the message, whatever the speakers are saying. Now, of course, if you can actually get yourself to conferences and attend conference talks, that's an excellent way to get information, because then you can also ask questions. The last conference I attended, I was getting a reputation for the questions that I asked during the Q&A sessions. Like, I don't listen passively. I take notes. I sometimes tweet during conference talks. I make sure that if I'm not going to ask a question then and there, I ask a question afterwards, either follow up immediately afterwards in person or follow up a little bit later if I'm interested in the topic. Now, as you get to know how conferences work, a lot of it is networking. And so you might not actually see a lot of the conference talks, but that's okay, because the next tip I have for you is networking. In fact, a lot of the conversations you can have with acquaintances, colleagues, coworkers, that is an excellent way to get information about what's going on in their workplaces, in their jobs, in their companies, what they've heard, the dirt that they hear down the grapevine, all of that. So don't discount personal one-on-one connection. Published papers and reports are something that I occasionally use. I have a folder on my desktop that is labeled to read that I almost never read. It's full of PDFs that look fantastic, but I don't really get around to them. I typically don't read a lot of published papers or reports simply because they are so very dense and often very dry and not very well written. Just personal opinion. So I actually prefer to have short form content or more visual content. But if I am going to read something that is in a more published paper format, whether it's peer reviewed or not, it's because I have a reason to. It's because I'm deep diving into a subject, or I really want to know the answer to a question, or I'm just curious enough to actually put in that dedicated time to read something long form like that. Reports can be especially useful if they come from independent research. NASA Office of Inspector General, OIG, puts out some really great analysis about NASA, for example. Some of the industry think tanks put out some great reports that they put a lot of effort in. That's really well worth the read. I tend to stay away from market research reports, especially ones that have projections, because they tend to be really super inaccurate. But if that's your thing, then go ahead and get your information from any kind of report that is out there that you want to dive into. And finally, this might surprise you, but social media, especially Twitter. There are a lot of space journalists on Twitter, and following individual journalists, especially the ones that are very prolific on Twitter, can be an excellent way of finding out credible space news in the moment, like to the minute, especially during live events like launches, landings, any kind of really exciting event that can bring the space community together. Following those journalists for actual credible information is so vital. They will sometimes post their articles, so it's an easy way for me to keep up with their writings. And it's not only following space journalists either. Also following individuals who post really interesting things about their own work can be really, truly valuable, because people share a lot of information on social media about what they're doing in their work, about their milestones, about the key things that they're excited about in the industry. And they might also post links to publications that I don't usually look at. So that can be fun. And of course, following individual companies and organizations that will sometimes post really valuable information. Sometimes it's mostly just marketing and PR, but sometimes it truly is really great information. Because I don't subscribe to a lot of company newsletters, I tend to follow more companies on Twitter and other social media accounts to keep up with their latest news. And that's pretty much it. It's simple, but it takes a lot of time. So again, if there is a particular format, whether it's long form or short form written, whether it is podcasts and radio interviews, whether it's conference talks, whether it's YouTube, whatever it happens to be, that will help you to get the information that you want, just dive in. And if you find that you're getting overwhelmed, then pick and choose the subjects that are most important to you. I do not follow all of space news. I cannot. There's no physical way for any individual to follow everything that's going on in space. It's a really packed industry, and not only that, it's not one industry. It is a collection of industries that we call the space industry. And so what you want to do is just pick your favorite topics. And for me, that happens to be more US focused. It happens to be more commercial and civil focused. It happens to be more emerging technologies and industries rather than the more established ones, let's say. And so you really really do need to pick and choose what you want, and then you dive into those topics that you're super excited to learn about. And that is how you stay really well informed in the space sector. If you are interested in getting a breakdown of the space industry, or diving deep into a specific space topic, or getting space analysis from a credible, non-hyped up source, my company Astrolytical specializes in helping companies, government entities, and nonprofits to grow in the space sector. So contact us for reliable, credible information and analysis on the space industry. Thanks so much for watching.